Welcome to Grow Sessions. I'm here with my good friends from the GCNC, Global Cannabis Network Collaborative, my friend Chris Day and Jill Reddish. How are you guys today?
Great. Thanks for
Well,
the invite.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for setting aside some time and chatting with us. So kind of get into the nitty gritty of it. I know like we've chatted in the past and we've, talking about a lot of different things, but why don't we start with, give us a little bit of intro of like who you are and where you came from, Chris.
Mhm.
Yeah, sure. My early history, I actually went to school at Colorado State up in Fort Collins, Colorado, and great ag school. Went to business college there and thought that my entire career was going to be spent in advertising. And I spent the first 23 years of my career running ad agencies in different parts of the country and with clients in different parts of the world. But I found that even the creativity that comes with that industry becomes somewhat redundant after a long time. And so I wanted to take a break and figure out what I was going to do when I grew up. And when that happened, I ended up getting recruited into the vice president of marketing role at a company called MJ Biz, which a fair
Well,
number of people have heard of. They had, this news program and a big trade show, and that hooked me into the cannabis industry. It was a very fast, deep dive into what was going on around the world and especially in North America at the time. And I was hooked. I was hooked because it's an industry that really matters, that is much maligned, that
sure.
has the potential for amazing impact. And I've always been an advocate for building businesses that do well by doing good. And I felt like within the cannabis space, we could do that. Um, Left MJ Biz at the end of 2019, headed into 2020, and was fortunate to be able to convince Jill to come along to form the Global Cannabis Network Collective, which we built to really help the gap in knowledge, communication, and connectivity between senior level cannabis industry players across different countries and continents. There's plenty of people working on state to state issues. We really wanted to work in the world and helping to grow that global ecosystem.
Yeah, it's it's
Yes.
it's definitely a global. It's global. It's been here for a while, but I mean, you're 100% right. But Jill, how about yourself? How did you get into the industry?
Yeah, so Chris was the one who recruited me into it, actually. We had known each other for quite a long time through the marketing world. That's my background in communications and everything. And I was in Seattle at the time, not particularly loving the job that I was in. And Chris was really intrigued by what was happening in cannabis and MJ Biz, MJ BizCon. And he kind of talked me into coming to work with him. So I took that big leap and I also was hooked. Really, really loved this space. And with the work that we were doing with MJ Biz, doing a fair amount of, international partnerships and outreach, we saw that nobody else was really kind of creating connection between the different organizations that were out there. And so when we both left MJ Biz with the pandemic, excuse me, Chris pitched this idea to me and a little entrepreneurial story. I said, that's a really good idea. That's
That's
gonna
awesome.
work. We should do that. And so it was for both of us, this was the leap into entrepreneurship, actually. And so now it's been 4 years, and it's how cannabis is. Things change constantly, and you're just in for a wild ride. And I think 4 years into it, we're doing something that people still come up and tell us, "Oh, I'm so glad that you're doing this. I've been looking for something like this." Trying to find connections in other countries, markets that are new to me. Who do I talk to? It's disorienting. Where do I start? And that's a big thing that we can offer through membership with the GCNC.
That's great. And I sometimes feel too like I've been in the industry about 4.5 years myself, and it feels like dog years. Like sometimes, like you like, wow, like things have changed so much even from when I started to like to today, and just how like how people look at things and what, or sometimes still the same struggles. But well, why don't we dive into the GCNC and we talk a little bit about what you guys are looking to accomplish and how are you guys helping everyone out there? Because I know you guys are helping us. We talk a lot, but how is GCNC helping folks on the international side?
There's a couple of different ways that we do this. Some of that is very surface, and if you just search it, you'll find it, right? You'll find our educational webinars, and you'll find that we do networking programs at some of the larger events around the world. We're building out a trade summit in South America in Lima, Peru. That's going to happen October 18th. Down there in conjunction with the Export Association and some of our members. That was a specific member request about a year ago to work on helping to highlight sort of this very, in relative terms, flexible law that really creates some amazing opportunities down there, but very few people knew about. And so when members come to us with requests like that, if it makes sense and we can accommodate it, we're going to try to do that. So it's education, it's top to top in-person networking, and then behind the scenes, we do a lot of work with members directly in trying to understand their business, what can most effectively help support them, and who else do we know that we can plug them into? Frequently, that's other members. And, TSRgrow is a great member. We're excited to have you guys. And, we can create those conversations behind the scenes to help drive velocity and market entry sometimes. And from that, we're supposed to be the incubator. We are the people that can help amplify the voice of our members into different markets, and also at times provide some credibility checks for folks, because not everyone can join. You've got to have proven yourself. You've got to have proven to be an ethical and well-operated company. And we take that quite seriously. So we're not an organization that is about being the largest in the world, but we are absolutely about connecting the best companies with each other in the world and making sure that if you decide you want to expand into Europe or South America or look at what's going on in Africa, we have people on the ground that can help you do that.
I love that.
I tell people that we kind of operate almost like an international chamber of commerce. It's an annual membership fee, and we have monthly regular meetings where it's all about creating connections between our members, where we have members all across the supply chain and literally all around the world also. So it's pretty comprehensive that way. And we do, as Chris described, it's a fair amount of business development support, which we which we come at in a lot of different kind of ways.
I like it too, because we've been on a lot of calls together, but also too, as you meet people and you schedule one-on-ones through the networking calls that we do monthly, it's nice because that's where you get some of your top information, or you might not even known that what my perception of what a rule or regulation may be in Germany, and then someone's like, actually it's this, and you're like, really? Where did you find that? And I think it's outstanding that you guys have a platform that people can actually talk to other people that have the same pain points.
Yeah, cannabis requires a lot of creativity, of course.
Oh God,
and as much as you can do the research on your own, you don't want to be in a vacuum. You want to be able to talk to peers in a different kind of market who are doing similar things, who are facing similar challenges. That's really valuable when you're an entrepreneur, as so many of our members are, right? In cannabis in general, there's hardly any business that's really well established, everybody light years away from like a Coca-Cola of the world, right?
Oh God,
There's no, standard operating system that hasn't changed for 25 years in cannabis. It's different every 6 months, and that's challenging and that's demanding. And so the opportunity that we give our members once a month to get together in our private Zoom room and really get down to brass tacks about what's happening, what challenges people are facing, that's really valuable. And then people are free to follow up afterwards, or they can always call us and just chat things through. And we always have a different perspective than when you're the business owner and you're just kind of focused on your immediate thing. We get to kind of bring in a whole big picture and spark some new ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I find it too. It's quite interesting. Like on some of the calls, or like if you finding out, like you said, what challenges they have, but also too what successes someone had. Like if I was talking to someone and saying, hey, listen, we've talked with these three people in whatever, in Greece or Macedonia, and this is what they're battling. And like sometimes people wouldn't know, but or they're saying this is what worked for us. It might work for you, and this is how we targeted it, or this is how we help them get to a certain level of, you know, buy-in, or whatever you want to call it. We're talking to a lot of folks, but you're right, like talking about the successes with amongst members, all of a sudden things start to make sense. And then really understanding what other members do, I think is so important.
Yeah, and one of the interesting sort of catalysts to the whole idea was we work outside of cannabis. I built a lot of trade shows and networking events and all that. And certainly within cannabis, this is even more true. While we have lots of event network partners, and we're happy to work with them because it creates these communities for conversations. But the truth is, 9 times out of 10, the deal is really getting done in a room down the street. It's not happening right in that. It's happening in these areas because people are brought together, but the show floors and the conference rooms and that isn't where the CEO is meeting with the CEO to ink the deal.
Agreed.
And we learned that early, right? And so we've created that room. We've created that space where the deals get done, the transactions can happen. And it can happen because the people in the network can be trusted. Yes, they have read the letter of the law, but they also know the realities of the marketplace and how to get it done. Sometimes that reaches far beyond just knowing what is in a law or in a framework. It's also knowing who actually wrote that so you can interpret it correctly and not have to submit your paperwork 6 times, right? And then who is the partner in that market that's actually got access to the customers that's going to help this deal flow. Just because you've set up in Germany doesn't mean you're automatically going to be able to sell in Germany.
This is true.
And so we've had success in creating these partnerships where deal flow is happening. We've taken some North American brands into South America. We've helped European companies create new transactions in the United States and Canada, and vice versa. And those are things that when we first launched were theoretical. Like, I'm always thankful for the first original members because they really were just trusting that what we were telling them was true, right?
Yeah.
It was promissory. It's like, if we do this, I promise it's going to happen. Now we have the proof points, and we have the members who can say, yeah, there is value here and there's connectivity, and we don't operate in a bubble. As Jill mentioned earlier with vacuum, so many people believe that only what they know right around them is what affects their business, and we try to shatter that and say, no, the opportunity really is the global ecosystem. If you're only working in a state or in a specific country and you think that's your limit, then you've hampered your own success.
Yeah, you've already lost. I say that a lot of times. I'm on a lot of networking calls across the country. Like I get on all these different Midwest ones, Connecticut ones, Metro West and Boston. If it turns into a complaining session, I'm like, I don't need to be there, because I'm like, if you're not looking outside of where you are, always be looking outside the box. And sometimes I make some of them, sometimes I don't, because we're busy, and they're like, oh, you missed this. I'm like, some of them I make sure I carve out the time, but other times I'm like, well, I missed it because the last 3 times people were just complaining. I'm like, I don't need to be there. I'm like, I've got better things to do in an hour and a half. And this one is like, I always want to make it because there's so much value. Like, even too, like I could be talking to someone that does human capital, that is kind of a recruiter, but kind of an HR, but kind of the right placement person. But I could be talking to the wrong person for the prize. Like, hey, we could be working on something collectively. And I'm like, I'm talking with Jill. She's like, yeah, well, that's not the person who makes the decisions. I'm like, good to know.
Yeah.
You know, like because it just happens sometimes, and you don't know because someone is talking to you, and you've had dialogue, you've had 5 or 6 calls. It's international, so it's not like you can swing by. You have to schedule meetings, and then they're like, "Yeah, well, that's actually not the decision maker." You're like, "Good to know," because, and I'm hoping to be that person that gives that insight to someone else. Like, this is who made the decision and cut us a check.
Yep. Yeah, and I would even say to add on to that, not only is it finding the right person, but to your point, finding the people who are about proactive action as opposed to just bitching. I
Agreed.
have spent so many times on panels talking about marketing, and the first 15 minutes is all about the stuff you can't do. It's like we've
Well, you
just
can't
burned
change.
collectively how many hours of time that we'll never get back talking about that, right? So as an example, it's Jill, it's October 7th that we're doing that, right?
Yeah.
October 7th, we're doing a webinar with some folks who are members, and they've brought in some clients and the Cannabis Media Council, all talking about on the advertising side, what can you do proactively? What has changed? What has been adapted? How do you buy advertising? Which to me is really exciting because way too many times people spend a lot of time complaining about, well, I can't do this, or the law says this, or the federal government sucks, and you know what? All that's true, and I don't disagree with you, but you're just wasting your time if
Yeah.
you spend all that time there. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
also
And well,
really
with
like
that,
our positive thinking. And now I'll stop because I'm
yeah.
just go off.
Yeah, power positive thinking. I want to shout out for the Cannabis Media Council. We have friends over there, and we're excited to do this webinar with them and highlight their work because what they've done over the past couple years is build a coalition of businesses who are willing to come together and present a united front towards advertisers. So some what that means is major publications like Meredith are finally opening up um their properties to cannabis advertising
Who is
because
it?
for what
Meredith?
yeah, the Meredith Corporation. So
Okay.
that's Sports Illustrated and
Oh, interesting.
Chris, what else? Um
Yep, you're going to have to come and listen to the podcast and the webinar.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're gonna have that, available on our website and LinkedIn and everything. But I just want to make the point that the way they brought together a coalition was bigger than any one group standing on their own, right? And that's the kind of thing that we're always looking for that opportunity with GCNC as also. It's a big world out there. We are always trying to make sure we're not spread too thin. But what are those opportunities where we realize that there's kind of a consensus that there is an opportunity, and if we can, kind of attack it or chip away at it slowly, because these things take time, we'll be stronger together. And I say this because a lot of the things I just said, we often hear from the advocacy groups and the lobbying groups, which we absolutely support. But the GCNC, just to clarify, is not doing that. We're not in that space. We're very much in the B2B, let's grow the market together. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. And growing a market takes a lot of different kinds of efforts as well to create education and create that kind of the pull of the market as well as much as we can push out our products as businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Definitely, I see that all the time with the just being able to show the positivity of it, like, and showing people there's this is what's working, and how can we get this out there, and then what kind of advocacy. Everybody's got an awesome story to it, and then how can we connect people, and how can we help each other, as well as like you were saying before, this is what's working for me, what's not working for me, but not really dive into it. Like, I worked with a company, and upper management was always like, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. State the
Yep.
problem, but tell me your give me your 3 ideas on how we can fix this.
Yep.
Not, like, how can you look at it like that? And I think that mostly the members that I've spoken with, which is quite a few, that have either met at trade shows or met on one-on-one calls, that they are solution-based people. They're
Yeah,
thinking.
absolutely. That's huge. It's solutions based and also, willing to understand that we're stronger together. So,
Of
so on
course.
our GCNC application, we ask everybody the question: are you willing to show up and participate and share the benefit of your experience? You know, we're not asking for trade secrets. If you need to get to the point of an NDA in a conversation you're having, great, do it. But you know, our member meetups, we ask people to respect privacy so that we can talk freely about some issues. But we're looking for people who are members who are willing to participate and share and show up.
Yeah, I think it's super important. I mean, so now what are you guys seeing like in the marketplace, like with members? Do you find like how it's being shared as like globally with like what's going on in Germany versus Peru or versus Uruguay or you know, what how do you feel that they're sharing that kind of information?
Yeah, it's particularly interesting, those dynamic, and those three countries are
Or
an
just picking some.
interesting group, right? Because Uruguay early on was sort of the champion, right? They were the first ones to federally legalize, and but it's a small country, small market, and relatively speaking, and so you know they have constantly been trying to figure out how do we stay in the game, right? And then you have Germany, which is this flashy object right now that people are really trying to understand. How do we get some of that? How do we get involved? And lots of headlines out there about how legalization has happened. But when you read the law, it's like, yes and no, right? Which is oftentimes how cannabis is. And so you've got to have the nuance. And then Peru, we have this country that has a solid and fairly flexible medicinal market, has just passed a hemp law, which is going to open up a whole new sector for industrial hemp, as well as hemp-derived cannabinoids. And they're in process right now of writing that framework and contemplating how do they shift into some sort of model that contemplates adult use so that they don't trip in the same way the United States did when they kind of ignored hemp-derived cannabinoids for a while at the federal level, and now nobody's quite sure how to fix that problem.
Yeah, how they're doing all
Right. How do we
the
do that?
distillates
So,
from hemp that are getting into beverages, and you see them at 7-Eleven and you see them at any just
right.
you see them in not the
Completely,
dispensary because it's wild.
And
completely
so,
unregulated.
It,
right. And so learning from each of those and predicting what the trends are going to be, if you see enough of them, is not too hard.
yeah,
Understanding the timing of those trends is the complicated piece. Understanding what the trends will be. There's some cultural adaptation that needs to happen in each market, but the truth is human behavior is fairly predictable. And so, you know, we've been collectively using cannabis for over 3,000 years in different parts of the world. This is not new. It is simply new under this current framework. And so we're able to take a lot of these shiny object discussions each time and say, totally get it, understand the enthusiasm, we're supportive of that. But please remember 3 years ago in the past shiny object situation, this is what happened. Let's learn from that. Let's adapt to it. Let's make sure that you know these companies can survive, that they aren't taxed into oblivion, that we've got the right quality controls, and the collective experience within our network, and then the collective knowledge through the extensions into these markets is actually pretty profound. I mean, I wish I could just download it all into a little USB drive and plug it into my head, but we can't. But having access to everyone and being able to have those discussions and explaining to people why they should care because it affects their business. What happens in Bangkok affects their business in Berlin.
yep.
And understanding how that happens is really important. And that's what we do because there just are not very many people who have, frankly, the luxury to be able to focus on those kind of global trends, but they're useful to everybody.
Well, it's learning understanding them. I mean, it's learning understanding. I mean, we've talked a little bit. We mentioned Peru a little bit. I know that there is a summit coming up in October in Peru. I mean, can you guys talk a little bit about the trade summit and what's happening down there?
Yeah, for sure. So it's the Andean Medical Cannabis and Hemp Trade Forum. So we're biting off a lot with the itinerary for one day because we're talking about a wide variety of hemp topics as well as medicinal markets, as well as looking forward to what could a more recreational market look like in Peru, and touching as much as we can on the rest of South America too. So we've got a lot of representatives from across that continent in our partnership with our members. Futura Farms is one of the early movers in Peru,
Who
and
was
they've
it?
been an early Futura Farms.
Futura Farms.
Yep, they've got really great group of leadership there, and they've been early members of the GCNC. So they've seen us evolve as well and have evolved with us. And so, like Chris said, they came to us a year ago and said there's a real opportunity coming for us to paint a picture of what future markets could look like. And we know that honestly, they said, we know that you as the GCNC can bring in the right kind of international players who can convey the right kind of lessons learned after, the Canadian bubble with Colombia, how to not repeat that. Folks who really understand what's happening with the global supply chain and how different businesses can and should play a role in that to ensure that we can deliver quality products to patients and to people who want these products. So there's it's a lot of potential right now, but things have momentum in Peru. And I'm really excited to hear from some of the representatives from the other South American countries who are coming to hear, what is Argentina thinking about? What is Chile thinking about? Ecuador also has its, is kind of watching the other member countries, and also we'll be getting an update from Uruguay, which has continued to kind of tweak their market. And then that's kind of on that's the cannabis and the hemp side, right? So, Chris, I think there's more that you can add about the
Sure.
whole. It's a packed agenda.
Yeah, I think the nice thing about this is that um, it's an event that is under 100 people on purpose. It is meant to
It's by
really,
design.
yeah, it's really meant to bring together people who can get deals done, who are deep in the space and understand it. We have representatives from the Peruvian government that have championed the laws and helped push them through coming. We have representatives from the Export Association who are ready to figure out how do we get deals done down there. We have members of the Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association in North America coming down to coordinate with indigenous groups in Peru and the surrounding countries. So while the agenda is super packed, we can do that and pull it off because these are not tire kickers. These are people who are experienced in the industry. They aren't exploring whether or not this is where their business belongs. These are people who are well established in business, and they're figuring out how do we expand and create these trade routes and create these opportunities, both for the domestic Peruvian markets, but also for South America as a whole. And we have representatives coming from Poland to look at how are we creating, cross-continent deals between Europe and
Import
South
export.
America.
So the
Yeah.
import export world. Do you feel there's a lot of crossover? Are there grows right now? Is there many established grows in Peru?
So the way they are primarily an import market at the
So they
moment.
import stuff from other countries and they do some processing there, then they ship it out as
Correct.
GMP and GACP.
So yeah, all of the quality, they do have quality controls in the market. Of course, they import from a variety of different markets. The largest would be Colombia at the moment, which makes sense in terms of geographic proximity. Final products, are done through compounding pharmacies there for the medicinal market. The hemp opportunity on the industrial side is enormous. And over time, as the law continues to evolve, I think we've seen that country operate quite favorably. I think a lot of that has been because the government seems to take the approach, and this is me as an outside person looking in, but they have done a fairly good job of taking the approach of this is happening. Regardless, people are consuming cannabis. This is a market that exists. How do we create a framework that people can have productive businesses, and how can we build this in a responsible way? Not for the most part trying to block it, right? Like a large part of the United States is this delusion that somehow cannabis can be kept out of certain markets. Right? That's a fool's errand. Quit being stupid, right? Let's build it in such a way that we bring the gray and black into the green, and we do the same thing in a way that, you know, yes, is productive for job generation and tax creation and all that stuff, but you're not using it as some sort of vice tax and you just tax people into oblivion. Peru's done a pretty good job of creating frameworks that are responsible, and I think that's because they're talking to the industry as they do it, and they're learning from the mistakes of others.
Well, they're embracing it too, and they're saying they're probably saying what's working. Like, because we see that here in the States, obviously, like you see some states that are doing a great job at launching it. Is it perfect? No, but I don't think anybody's done a perfect launch, but I think there's a lot of states that have done a good job. But then you see within that state, the municipalities and towns that really embracing it. And you see all the new roads, new fire trucks, new schools, like they issued a certain amount of licenses, but not too many. And then they're collecting, they weren't pigs on the tax, they actually are collecting some tax revenue. But like all the kids have a new laptop, and there's all new schools, and there's a new library. You're like,
and
okay,
who knew, right? Yeah.
who would have thought this is a whole nother thing for a town to generate some revenue and actually bring industry back to those mill towns in certain New England. I see it here in New England a lot. Like these old mill towns that have just been defunct and they're just kind of depressed. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, look at that. There's industry there now.
Yeah. And so we're extending that kind of knowledge and experience into these other markets and showing the positivity of what can happen if done responsibly, right? There is definitely throughout South America a huge hangover still from the sins of the Canadian infusion of irresponsible capital into that market earlier on. A lot of people got severely burned. A lot of people got left hanging. Facilities were built, promises were never fulfilled. And so bringing back now, as that has settled and people are building it more pragmatically and responsibly, there's still a hesitation by many to invest into that market, even though the numbers are good and the industry's growing and cultivation opportunities there are awesome. That's just going to take time to continue to prove out. And it's part of why we're such supporters there. I mean, Jill just got back from Germany. I spent half the year last year in Europe. We understand the importance of the European market, and we're right there with everybody. At the same time, as founders of the GCNC, it's our job to both look at what is today as well as what is coming down the path the next year or two.
Yeah, to be global with it, right? And so this policy discussion that we're having, we're going to continue that at the end of the year in December. During MJ BizCon week, we're involved with the Cannabis Policy Institute symposium event that's happening. Some friends of ours are kicking this off, and it's being hosted at the University of Las Vegas. There's a new Cannabis Policy Institute that started there, which is really exciting to see that kind of investment at the higher education level. And so I'm really excited that we'll be able to be there and share with folks about the conversations that came out of Peru. It'll be, a month and a half later. And, we've really seen from the global perspective that we have that the most successful policies that are implemented are ones that actually have a feedback loop with businesses built in, because having that two-way dialogue is what really matters and makes a difference. Because you create a regulation and you got to get something down on paper, but it's never going to be perfect the first time right off the bat. It needs to be iterative, and it needs to have that feedback loop from businesses and all the stakeholders. Excuse me. So the Cannabis Policy Institute is definitely something to check out as well. December 5th. So we'll be sharing information about that event out on our social channels and everything. So it's you know it's never a dull moment for us at the GCNC.
I don't think it's a dull moment ever in the industry. I mean, I always feel like every day you never know what you're going to get. Like
Yeah.
you just don't. I mean, in when we speak with folks, I mean, I was saying earlier when we chatted, how many people I talk with every day, and sometimes they don't. Their perception of yes, there's some predatory stuff that happens, and there's some stuff that goes on, but nothing happens fast. Or if it does, it's not good. I mean, it's called like it is. I mean, you can like I get on calls with folks and they've got a great plan and not saying we know it all. We've done a lot of projects, so we give, our unfettered advice, but we're like, you can do it that way. But why would you? Type of, I guess so. But well, and this has been great dialogue. I'm so glad you guys were able to set aside some time for us. How can people get a hold of the GCNC, and like what's the best way to like reach out? Is it through social channels? Is it through your website?
Yeah, we're very active on LinkedIn. You'll find us under GCNC or the Global Cannabis Network Collective. Our website is pretty easy. It's gcnc.global, so www.gcnc.global. And then Chris and I are both really active on LinkedIn, and I feel like if you talk to enough people in the industry, somebody's going to know us and be able to put you in touch also.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Just
Yeah,
thanks so much for the time. It's always great to get on and talk through this kind of thing and have these global conversations. I will never feel like there's enough of them, so the more we can do it, the better.
for sure.
And
Maybe we'll
I
have to
tell
do another
people,
update one. We'll have to do another
yeah,
podcast with an update.
yeah, and I tell people if you want to have a business that actually operates in the world, you have to get out into it.
You have to
And
have
our
reach. You have to
job
have reach and outreach.
Yeah, our job is to help people do that more effectively. So hopefully as people hear this, it'll resonate with them, and wherever we can help, we're happy to do so.
Love it. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right. You guys have a great day.